8 hostages. 3 Israelis, 5 foreign workers have been released by Hamas. This comes as President Trump's Middle East envoy is back in the region to help keep the ceasefire agreement on track. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has the story.
This is the 3rd hostage release in 2 weeks as part of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. Agam Berger, held by Hamas, was paraded on a stage in the Jabaliya refugee camp. Her family celebrated her freedom by dancing with a Torah scroll and thanking God. Berger, the last female observation soldier to be released, was handed over to the Red Cross, transferred to the IDF, and finally reunited with her family. Arbel Yehud and 80-year-old Gadi Moses, who were kidnapped from their homes in Kibbutz Nir Oz, were held by Islamic Jihad. The group released a video Thursday showing the two being reunited before being released. In a last-minute development, 5 Thai workers were also released. They were among 10 foreign nationals working in farming communities who were abducted on October 7th and still held hostage. 3 more Israeli hostages, as yet unnamed, are due to be set free on Saturday. The 3-part deal should lead to Hamas releasing all the remaining hostages, but it also forces Israel to free hundreds of Palestinian prisoners who've committed acts of terror and murdered Jews. Jerusalem Post columnist Gil Troy told CBN News, even if the deal is worrying, Israel made a lot of gains in Gaza and Lebanon since this deal was first proposed last May.
Since May, we've seen Hezbollah humiliated, Iran weakened. We've seen Hamas further degraded. And so even though Hamas is celebrating, they're celebrating in ruins. Even though Hamas is celebrating, they've lost over 20,000 of their top terrorists.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met again with President Trump's Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff. In a surprise move, Witkoff visited families of other hostages today as they gathered to watch the hostages being released.
I think it's showing what wonderful, how joyous the people of Israel are, and all over the world.
Netanyahu is set to be the first foreign leader to meet with the new president in Washington next week. President Trump is suggesting Israel's neighbors, Jordan and Egypt, take in many of the Palestinians made homeless by the war in Gaza. But Egypt's president is outright rejecting the notion, hinting that Palestinians might be a threat to his government.
I would like to reassure the Egyptian people that the harm to Egypt's national security could never be tolerated or allowed.
El-Sisi insists the answer is creating a Palestinian state.
The 2-state solution, side by side, security and peace for the Israeli citizen and security and safety for the Palestinian citizen.
Many Israelis point out they gave the Palestinians Gaza already, and Hamas turned it into a deadly terrorist state that launched a deadly attack. The Syrian rebel who led the overthrow of the Assad regime is now Syria's interim president. Islamist Ahmed al-Shara used to lead Syria's version of al-Qaeda, but he swears he's moderated his views and will lead a democratic government. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, I don't believe him. I'm sorry. His ideology runs deep. And that's the overall problem here, whether you're talking about Lebanon or Syria or Jordan or Egypt or the West Bank or Gaza. It's the ideology that is the problem, and it holds some pretty extreme views. And most Americans aren't educated on just how extreme they are. They believe, and believe as an article of faith, that Jews are somehow descended from apes and pigs, and that they're not really human. And therefore, if you hear or see one of them, they're trying to hide behind a rock, you're supposed to kill them. That is, it's amazing when you read these things. How can anybody today believe that kind of nonsense? But they do. The second thing they believe is once a nation, once a territory, once a piece of land is under Sharia law, it's an offense against all Islam for it to no longer be under Sharia law. So the whole campaign of October 7th, Al-Aqsa flood, they're talking about the Temple Mount. That was their target. It wasn't the Gaza envelope. They wanted to go all the way to the Temple Mount. Now, there was a Arab Spring and the great hope that there would be democracy in the Middle East. Who did Egypt elect to lead them? Well, they elected the Muslim Brotherhood. when the Bush administration enforced free elections, required Israel to withdraw so that they would no longer have security control over Gaza. And the whole promise was, if people are given the choice and given democracy, that they will want to be free, they will want the prosperity for themselves, their children, their grandchildren. Who did the people of Gaza elect to lead them? They elected Hamas, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. In the charter that Hamas had, they've tried to update it to make it a little more friendly, but they've kept the fundamental tenet. The whole reason for Hamas to exist is to wipe Israel off the map. That's what's stated in their own documents. And so if that's who the people of Gaza are going to elect to be their leaders, and if they're left in leadership, what in the world do we expect to happen a year from now, 2 years from now? From 2006 to October 7th, 2024, continual rocket attacks. They named towns in the Gaza envelope. One was named Rocket Town because of the number of rockets that would come in. They never expected an invasion. They didn't think that they were going to have that. But that's exactly what happened and will happen again, because that's what Hamas has pledged. We can't have security in Israel. We can't have security in the Middle East as long as this kind of ideology is elected into power. You can't have it. They don't go together. So my hope and my prayer is that the Trump administration, the Netanyahu government, will recognize the reality of what they're dealing with and say, no, Hamas, you can't stay in power. That needs to happen once all the hostages are released, because as long as there are hostages in the equation, you can't say, okay, we're going to go in again in force. This is a very difficult situation. Please pray for it. We need a spiritual answer to this problem.